Welcome to The Explainer. If you're prepping for the UPSC exams, you know that every single constitutional detail matters. Today, we're going to break down a really important and, honestly, an often misunderstood topic in an Indian polity, the office of the Vice President of India.
You know, some constitutional scholars have actually called the Vice President's office his superfluous highness. Kind of sounds like it's just an unnecessary, ornamental post, right? But is that really the case? Over the next few minutes, we're going to dive deep into the nuts and bolts of this office and see if it's truly just for show or if it plays a vital role in our constitutional framework.
So where does this office even come from? Well, you'll find it right there in Article 63 of the Constitution. It just says, there shall be a Vice President of India. Simple as that. As the second highest office in the country, its main job is to maintain political continuity. Think of it as a constitutional fail-safe, a way to make sure there's never a power vacuum at the very top. Okay, that leads to the big question. How do we actually elect this second-in-command? Well, it's an indirect election, so not by the people directly, but by an electoral college. And this is where it gets really interesting, and it's a critical point for your exams, because the way we elect a VP is pretty different from how we elect the president. The first huge difference, and you've got to know this, is the electoral college itself. So who exactly gets to cast a vote for the vice president? Okay, so look at this. This slide lays it out perfectly. For the president, you have elected MPs and elected MLAs from the states. But for the vice president, here's the twist. You get both elected and nominated members of parliament. But, and this is the key part, you completely leave out the members of state legislatures. No MLAs get a say at all. So why? What's the logic behind that? Well, the reasoning comes straight from the man himself, Dr. Ambedkar. He basically said, look, the president is the head of the entire country, center and states, so it makes sense for the states to have a voice. The vice president, on the other hand, what's their main day-to-day job? It's to be the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. It's a central government function. So, since their job doesn't really touch state administration, it wasn't seen as necessary for the states to be involved in their election. And here's what that process looks like in the real world. The election uses a system of proportional representation. And as you can see from the 2022 results, it's designed to give us a winner with a really clear, solid majority, showing they have broad support from within Parliament. So who can actually throw their hat in the ring for this job? Well, the Constitution is super specific about the qualifications. There are 4 main boxes you have to tick. You have to be a citizen of India, be at least 35 years old, and you can't hold any office of profit. And then there's this last one, which is really important. You have to be qualified to be elected as a member of the Rajya Sabha. And that just makes total sense, right? Since their main job is to be the chairperson of that very house. The term is a fixed 5 years. Straight up, it starts from the date they enter office. And once they're elected, they take an oath, which is administered by the President of India. All right, now for the big question. What does the Vice President actually do? Well, you can think of the VP as wearing 2 completely different hats. So this office really has a dual personality. The first role, the everyday gig, is being the ex-officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha. And ex-officio just means they hold that position simply because they're the vice president. The second role, and this is the really critical one, is to step in and act as president whenever that office becomes vacant. And this is a huge point to remember. This presidential role is strictly temporary. It's a stopgap measure, not a permanent takeover. If the president's office falls vacant, the VP steps in, but only for a maximum of 6 months. And within that time, a new president must be elected. So, what happens if the VP doesn't finish their full 5-year term? A vacancy can happen in a few ways, but the one you really need to understand for your exams is the process of removal. A vacancy can happen if their term just ends, they could pass away while in office, or they could choose to resign by just writing a letter to the president. But that fourth one, removal by Parliament, that's where things get really unique. Okay, so the removal process is totally one of a kind. First, the VP gets a heads up, a 14-day advance notice. Now, here's the crucial bit. The resolution to remove them can only start in the Rajya Sabha. It has to. And to pass there, it needs something called an effective majority. After that, it goes to the Lok Sabha, where it just needs a simple majority to agree. So what on earth is an effective majority? It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's not just 50% of whoever shows up to vote that day. Nope, it's a majority of the effective strength of the House. Basically, you take the total number of seats, subtract any that are vacant, and you need more than half of that number to vote yes. And get this, this is another one of those fascinating constitutional details.
For the president, they can only be impeached for one specific reason, violation of the Constitution. But for the vice president, the Constitution is totally silent. It mentions absolutely no grounds for their removal. So theoretically, Parliament could remove the VP without having to state a formal reason. Okay, this all leads us to a final, absolutely critical comparison. And trust me, this is a classic exam question. The difference between the Vice President of India and the Vice President of the United States. And this right here is the single biggest difference. In India, the vice president only acts as president until a new one is elected within that 6-month window. But in the United States, if the presidency becomes vacant, the vice president becomes the president and serves out the entire rest of the term. That distinction between acting as and becoming is everything.
Which brings us all the way back to that first question. His superfluous highness? After everything we've looked at, the unique election, the specific role as Rajya Sabha chairman, and that critical temporary presidential function, the office is clearly anything but superfluous. It's a carefully designed role, a vital constitutional shock absorber built specifically to ensure political continuity.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The fact that India's vice president is just a temporary caretaker, making sure a new president is elected quickly instead of inheriting the whole term like in the US, is that a strength because it preserves the fresh mandate of a presidential election, or is it a weakness in our constitutional design? Something to think about. Good luck with your preparation.